Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay and the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
What is up? Welcome to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. I'm Jeff Sharon, along with Eric Lopez. And Eric, it's a busy May here, and we're recording this on the last day of May 31st. We're heading into June, and boy, we still got UCF sports going on. Isn't this great?
I know. The journey, the road to Omaha. I haven't said that in 5 years. I'm excited.
It's going to be football season before we know it, the way this is going. We got a lot to talk about here on this show. Guest today is going to be Trylko, our buddy from the Knightline Podcast, coming on to join us to talk about UCF Baseball. The Knights are headed back to the NCAA Tournament. They are in the Tallahassee Regional. We'll have a full breakdown of that. We also got to break down the NCAA Golf Championships, UCF finishing tied for 14th overall, and also rowing with their best program finish in the NCAAs, and some news from here and there throughout the world of UCF sports. As usual, you can follow us at blackandgoldbanneret.com, sign up to get email notifications of new content, new podcasts, whatnot. You can look us up on Facebook as well, Black and Gold Banneret there. You can hit us up on Twitter at UCF_Banneret. I am on Twitter at Jeff_Sharon, and Eric is on Twitter at Eric Lopez Elo. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, and TuneIn. All right, Elo, let's get started. Let's talk a little baseball. First things first, man. Disappointing conclusion to the tournament, the American Athletic Conference tournament, where the Knights got to semifinal Saturday, had to beat ECU twice, but lost for the second time in the tournament to ECU. ECU went in to lose and get really handled pretty easily by Houston. So the Knights with a semifinal trip to Clearwater, but it would have been nice to see what they could do against Houston. But still, that's good enough for them to get in as an at-large to the NCAAs. They're heading to the Tallahassee Regional, a place where UCF is quite familiar with going in baseball tournament past. The Knights are in there along with, there, I got my bracket. They're the 2 seed of the regional. Florida State, of course, hosting the 1 seed. 3 seed is Auburn. 4 seed is Tennessee Tech. The Knights are one of 3 American Athletic Conference teams to make it. Houston is hosting. And USF is the 2 seed in the Gainesville Regional, playing against Florida, Bethune-Cookman, and Marist. Who's Houston got? There they are. I got Baylor, Texas A&M, and Iowa. Tough regional for Houston. But here are the Knights. They finish up in the 30s in the RPI. Could have been a little bit better if they knocked off Houston, I think. But are you disappointed, surprised? What did you think about how this all played out?
Well, first of all, the conference tournament, it was my first time there. What a beautiful setting Clearwater is. I mean, what a phenomenal place in the stadium. Certainly recommend people to go there at some point, and I had Mike Oresco on the radio show I do on the weekends on 1080 in Orlando. And, he basically said they're going to be in Clearwater through 2021, basically. And I think it's a great call. People like it. The teams like it. Everybody likes it there. I know people might say, well, nobody's going to these games. It's actually not accurate. There was a pretty decent crowd at the game on Saturday against East Carolina. The problem is, as you know, Jeff, being there, a lot of the fans are going to hide under the shade. So if you're watching the game on television, it looks like nobody's there, but in reality, they're actually further back.
Because it was 100 degrees during the weekend. It was pretty hot after that storm blew through.
And the thing is, I don't know what would be the answer as far as if you don't put it in Clearwater, what location are you going to put it for baseball that would guarantee people to come? I don't know if necessarily, having it on campus, right? I guess that would be the answer. If you don't do it in Clearwater, it would have to be on campus. But again, how do you determine that? If you go random like softball does, where you just rotate hosts, are fans just going to go out to Tampa one year when the tournament's there in Orlando? Is it going to be that different of a crowd? I don't know if it is, but so I just wanted to share that thought. What a beautiful tournament. And you're lucky. You get to be involved in that every year. Yeah. That's a pretty fortunate gig there. I got to see the setting. I'm like, man, that's a lot of fun. So as far as the East Carolina, the result in that, I actually went on Saturday, and I felt it was funny. I'll give you the story. I did the radio show, and then I went to cover that East Carolina game, and I actually felt pretty good because I thought at the time that Sheridan was going to pitch. I had no idea about the flu situation within the team. And it wasn't until I was listening to Mark on the car on the way there as I got closer to Clearwater where he was not even in the stadium because of the flu. And they started Bar. I'm like, there goes their chance of, forcing a second game and probably knocking off the Pirates twice. And I think that's kind of what happened. I almost have to, you can't really, with all the flu situations that they ran into on the team, I think that definitely affected him. I know people will look back at the East Carolina game, the first game back on Tuesday, as far as starting a midweek starter there, and they got hit pretty good by the Pirates. The Pirates had their best pitchers. So I just think they got a tough draw, Jeff. I think if UCF would have gotten a Cincinnati or even a Memphis, which has a very weak bullpen, I think UCF would have been better served. Unfortunately, they got East Carolina, and I think that kind of set them back. But, I thought Williams was fantastic, how they made a nice run. The bats were manhandled, and I had a chance to talk to Coach Lovelady afterwards. He was not happy about the approach from his lineup, and I think as you go into the NCAA tournament, that's the big question. I don't really question the pitching staff. In fact, I can make the argument this might be as deep of a pitching that UCF's ever has had in the NCAA tournament in a long time. I think they're deeper than 2012, for example, but they don't have the bats that 2012 does, and that's my concern is – they might get good pitching, but it may not matter if they can't score. And they're going to face some good pitching this weekend as far as Auburn and Florida State. Even if they get to play Florida State, they got to get through Auburn first, who's got two great arms. And we had Mike Lanana from Baseball America, covers college baseball. He was on Ackerman and O'Neill this week. And he said Auburn's one of the most dangerous 3 seeds right now in the entire field. They can win this regional. I think
don't
we need
tell me that.
No, that's the thing. They are one of the dangerous 3 seeds in this tournament. So I rather worry about Auburn because Auburn, they've got talent there. They've kind of been similar from the standpoint that their offense has had some ups and downs. So I expect a low scoring game. But let's not underestimate Auburn at all. I think this regional is loaded. And I think in talking to people, I think you can make the argument that this regional, 3 teams can win this regional. Obviously, Florida State is the host. I think UCF with the pitching can win this regional, but I also think Auburn can win this regional. I think that's what makes this regional very fascinating.
Auburn struggled in a stacked SEC this year. They finished 35-24 overall, 16-14 in the SEC, which was good enough for 5th in the SEC West. To give you an idea of what they were looking at. Ole Miss, who was right behind them, 14-16 in the SEC. They had an RPI in the 30s. They got left out of the tournament. On the other hand, you talk about Florida State. When we played them earlier this year, obviously, the result wasn't good. Florida State clobbered us in those games that they in 2 of those games. That was when they were a top 5 opponent. They really struggled. At one point, they were 21-15. They were thinking, "Wow, we will go from." It was almost like a replay of UCF last year. Go from a top 10 team to possibly out of the tournament if this keeps up. And they had the hard part of their schedule coming up. They got hot. They made it into the tournament, and now they're hosting. So that's going to be that's again. You're right. I think you got 3 teams that could potentially could potentially come out of that regional.
And I think the fascinating thing is, what does UCF and Auburn do on Friday? Auburn's got 2 great pitchers, Casey Mize and Keegan Thompson. Those are their 1-2. Casey Mize is 7-2 on the year, 1.93 ERA. He's one of the top pitchers in the SEC. And then you got Keegan Thompson, who's 6-4, but he has a 2.43 ERA on the year. The Auburn doesn't have the depth pitching-wise, and I think where I would give UCF the edge is in the bullpen. I think in the bullpen is where UCF can really differentiate itself from Auburn. But you look at Auburn's offensively, they hit 275 as a team. Not a lot of power, only 28 home runs for Auburn. Now, what's interesting about Dick Howser Stadium, that's usually a good home run park. That's where Florida State hits a lot of their home runs. So I think UCF, the key for them is, are they going to be able to hit either Mize or Thompson? They're going to see one of them on Friday. And I think for Greg Lovelady, let me toss you this idea.
Okay.
You mentioned the Florida State series. That was in early March. This tells you how long a college baseball season is. You realize that the 2 starters for UCF in those 2 midweek games against Florida State, which was ranked number 2 in the country at the time, was Chris Williams and Joe Sheridan.
Lots
who are
happened
now,
since then.
Isn't that wild? And now they've become the weekend guys and have been tremendous. And one of the things that happened in the conference tournament was that Sheridan didn't pitch in the tournament at all because of his flu situation, with the health situation. So I'm wondering, Jeff, if you're Greg Lovelady, a couple things. Williams and Sheridan both pitched against Florida State. So Florida State has seen both of them, whereas let's say UCF were to win Friday and play Florida State on Saturday. UCF will get to see Florida State's ace, weekend guy, not the midweeks that they saw earlier this year. If you're Lovelady, Chris Williams, who has pitched magnificent the last month or so, was tremendous in the conference tournament, dominated USF. Sheridan, I think, has been phenomenal. I'm excited about his future. Won the championship game against USF in the regular season. Does Lovelady consider starting Sheridan, for example, on Friday, who he hasn't pitched in over a week, or Williams, and save Howell for Saturday in case they play Florida State? And they might sound crazy because the way the year has gone, he's gone Howell, Williams, Sheridan lately. That's the rotation. Howell is your senior guy. But I really do believe this, Jeff. I think Williams in particular and Sheridan have pitched just as good as Robbie Howe has the last few weeks. So it's not an indictment on Howe. It's more of a compliment on Williams and Sheridan and how much I believe in those guys. So I wonder if Lovelady considers going with Sheridan, who he hasn't thrown in about over a week. And maybe if you beat Auburn, now you got Robbie Howe, who Florida State didn't see this year, maybe gives you a better chance to beat the Noles if you get to that point. Now, he might just stay with what he's been doing and go with the senior and Robbie Howe on Friday and then go with Williams or Sheridan once again on Saturday. But it is a food for thought, isn't it?
Yeah, if it were me sitting in that seat, I would say I want to throw all my cards in on that first game and be 1-0. Because it's a double elimination 4-team bracket. I don't want to be in that loser's bracket. I want to have one game to play with. So give me that. Get me my best guy out there, and if that's Sheridan, so be it. I think at the very least he'll be fresh, assuming he's healthy. I would toss Sheridan out there to actually throw him. But again, I'm not one of them. I'm not the head coach. That's Greg Lovelady's job to figure out.
And the counter argument is if you throw Sheridan, who's a freshman who hasn't thrown over a week, you don't know if he'll be rusty or not. You keep Howell, who's been on a relative similar schedule. That's why Robbie Howe, for example, didn't pitch on that Tuesday against East Carolina, because you wanted to keep him in the same rotation, same schedule that he's been all year. Same thing with Chris Williams. So I think Robbie Howe pitched the Thursday game against Tulane, and Williams pitched that Friday game against USF. So it wouldn't be as big of an adjustment for them. So it's just food for thought. It just tells me, I only bring it up because I really do believe, Jeff, that this is the most depth they've had as far as pitching arms in a regional in a long time. I can't remember them actually having 3 guys that you have a lot of confidence in going to a regional. Even the great 2001 team, and I'll tell the story real brief. 2001, and people that may not know, UCF had one of their best teams ever. They dominated the A-Sun.
Yep.
They were top 10 in the country.
That was Justin Pope and Jason Arnold, right?
Yep, arguably the two greatest pitchers in the history of the Black and Gold in this program. They didn't host, but they were the number 1 overall seed. They were sent to South Carolina, which is crazy, even thinking about it now. But one of the things that hurt that team, outside of not being able to host, was, if people don't remember, in that Friday game, they played a 4-seeded Princeton team. And so Jay Bergman, the head coach, decided to go with his number 3 starter at the time. I believe it was Busbit was his name. And he got rocked. Princeton hit him. And it was a slugfest. UCF had to come from behind with their offense. But because they hit all the UCF pitchers, Bergman actually had to use Arnold to close the game out. Now, fortunately, Jason Arnold, if you Hall of Famer in UCF athletics, was a great closer, was also a great starter. So he's very versatile. But as a result of that, of using Arnold, I think it hurt UCF later in that regional. Justin Pope would end up beating South Carolina in the winner's bracket game on Saturday to pull within 1 game of the super regional. But the problem was, because you used Arnold in relief on Friday, he didn't have a lot left by Sunday. In fact, South Carolina won the first game to force the if necessary. Bergman started Arnold. Arnold got off to a good start, but kind of ran out of gas middle of the game, and South Carolina won. And I always wondered, if Arnold didn't have to pitch that Friday game in relief, could we have had a different story? I think we would have. I think Arnold, if he didn't come in that Friday game, I think he would have started that first game on Sunday to try to close it out. So my point is that as great as that team was, there was only 2. They were basically on a 2-arm, they were banked on 2 arms. I think this team's got 3 arms and maybe 4, because I actually thought Barr, who hadn't started it since March, I thought he threw pretty well in that Saturday game against East Carolina. I think Lovelady, one of the reasons why he was frustrated with his offense, I think he was happy with what he got from his pitching staff in that Saturday game. They just couldn't get anything going offensively. And that's going to be the story to me in this regional. We could talk all we want about who he throws and how, the pitching depth all we want. But if this team gets manhandled by, as we mentioned, the Auburn pitching on Friday and definitely the Florida State pitching, it could be a quick regional. I mean, that's what's so fascinating. Which offense for UCF will come out here? Can they get some offense going? Because I didn't like what I saw on Saturday. You saw when they blew out USF. That's the offense that needs to show up. But even then, that was more of a couple of big innings. It was not throughout the game. So that's my concern going into this weekend.
Well, I'll take it. I'll take 12 runs any way you can. But so a couple quick notes before we get to Trace. Of course, this is UCF's first trip to the NCAA tournament since 2012, when they were eliminated, like you said, Eric, by Stony Brook down in Coral Gables. The closest the Knights have gotten to the super regionals was back in, I would say, 2004. They were 3-2, eliminated by Florida State in
Stephen
Tallahassee.
Drew Regional. Drew Regional. That guy couldn't stop hitting, man.
Right. And the Knights actually forced that second game on the final day, but then Florida State took care of business at the very end. That was Jay Bergman's last trip to the NCAA tournament.
And let's address this, because I know some fans are frustrated because they're back in Tallahassee. It's kind of funny. I've talked about how softball always gets sent to Gainesville, and especially every even year. They always get sent there. With baseball, it's been Tallahassee. It's been very interesting. If you look at the history of the baseball program, they've always been sent to Tallahassee. Believe it or not, only 2 times ever has UCF been sent to Gainesville. It was back in 1989 and back in 1996, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. Yeah. You would think they would have been sent there more often. To put that in perspective, they've been, Miami, that 2012 year, they were sent there. Tallahassee, they've been sent in 93, 95, 97, 2000, 2002, 2004, and 2011. It's kind of crazy that has happened so much. So I understand the frustration with that. That being said, I actually agree with the committee sending them to Tallahassee. First of all, I think they got the weaker of the 2 Florida teams. Florida is a way better team than Florida State. Don't be fooled. The Florida starting pitching and rotation in the weekend is phenomenal. So I think, based on the fact that UCF won the regular season title in the American, beat USF again in the tournament. On paper, they should get the easier team. If you're going to keep both of them in the state, they should get the easier team, which is what they did. They got Florida State instead of Florida. Plus, I know some people are upset because Florida Gulf Coast got sent out of state. It's a crazy concept. But in defense, Florida Gulf Coast is the weaker of the 3-2 seeds. They're weaker than UCF. They're weaker than USF. So they got out of the state, but they got sent to the number 2 team overall seed in North Carolina, which is a rough regional. So I actually think UCF got a fair, seeding and placement. And as you mentioned earlier, Florida State a week ago, I don't think anybody thought they were even going to host. And one of the reasons why I think UCF was being considered to host is because Florida State wasn't going to host. So, Florida State's gotten hot. They won 2 games at the end of the regular season at Louisville, which was number 1 in the country at the time. They obviously won the ACC tournament. They're a lot healthier now. They've had some injuries. You've documented their kind of drama. It was funny when we saw them here in Orlando. They were ranked number 2 in the country. A lot of people, I thought they were a really solid team, and then they went through a lot of adversity. I think some of it, the media over-dramatized it a little bit because it was Florida State. If it was any other program, I think they were fine. I never felt they were in danger of missing the tournament, but they want to over-dramatize it. But that being said, you do have to wonder, and this is one positive for UCF, did Florida State burn kind of their fire, if you will, by making this late run? Sometimes teams do that and then kind of come out flat or just don't have it the following weekend. Or did Florida State find the talent? This was a top 5 preseason team before the year. Did they finally find that mojo and could be a dangerous team? Who knows? But it's a fascinating regional with so many subplots and questions that I'm looking forward to seeing how it gets played out.
All right, and remember those games will be starting on Friday.
Noon on the deuce, baby.
High noon Friday on ESPN. Yeah, ESPN2. So that's a good TV spot for UCF as well. One more thing before we take a quick break. Little MLB debut to pass along to you. Eric Skoglund made his Major League debut for the Kansas City Royals yesterday. It was it was Tuesday, March 30th. Of course, you all remember Eric, 6'7" lefty.
May 30th. May 30th, by the way, ladies and gentlemen.
Did I say May 30th? Did I say June 30th?
You said March.
March? May 30th. Well, they all run together. You all remember Eric, 6'7" junior out of Sarasota, had a very successful UCF career. And he, came up through the Royal system and made his debut. And quite a debut it was for Eric in that Royals uniform. I was following it throughout the evening. He threw an absolute gem against the Detroit Tigers. Finished off with 6 1/3 innings. Gave up only 2 hits, shut out, no runs, 2 hits. At one point, he retired 14 Tigers in a row. He struck out Miguel Cabrera, and he got his first major league victory, a 1-0 win for Kansas City. So what a start for Eric Skoglund in his first game in the majors.
I got to watch it. I watched it on my computer. Quick story. I called his first ever start at UCF. Back in March of 2012, he pitched against Siena, went 5 innings, got the victory. So I've called a handful of his games at UCF back in the day when I was calling baseball games his freshman year, and I think a couple in his sophomore year, I don't remember. And then I called a handful of his games in the summer of 2013 when he was actually playing in the Florida State Collegiate League here in the Central Florida area.
Yeah, the wooden bat league that we have around here.
Yes, I did games from Tinker Field, believe it or not, and he would pitch, and I got to talk to him and hang out with him a lot that summer, and he was, and then he had that monster junior year in 2014 when he won the Pitcher of the Year award. So I was really excited for him. Great guy. It was really cool to see him do his thing, and he was tremendous. I mean, he outpitched Justin Verlander. Hello.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting little note from that game, too, that they mentioned in the Kansas City telecast, a matchup between 2 pitchers who were recruited by Terry Rooney.
Yeah, Rooney.
Rooney recruited Verlander to Old Dominion, if I think it was in a previous in his previous baseball career. So I thought that was pretty interesting. All of a sudden, I saw the highlight, and and I think it was Brendan Helwig tweeted out a picture, a screen grab of the Kansas City telecast, and there's Terry Rooney staring at you in a UCF cap. They're mentioning that he had a hand in recruiting both Eric Skoglund and Justin Verlander. So congratulations to Eric. Hopefully he stays up with the big club a little bit longer and nestles in with the Kansas City rotation. And he would, again, another UCF guy in the majors. So that's never a bad thing.
No, and he was the number 3 prospect for the Royals coming into the year. So certainly, I think he's got a good future there. And don't be surprised if Ben Lively is next. He could be next coming up and starting for the Philadelphia Phillies, maybe as early as this weekend, I've heard, because the Phillies just had a starter go on the DL, and there's some talk that Lively might get called up. So great positive baseball momentum for this program, Jeff, I think is tremendous. Obviously on the field right now, going to the NCAA tournament, but even if you want to call it off the field with the guys performing in the pros.
Good stuff. All right, we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll have Trace Trylko joining us for the Knightline Podcast, crossing over to the dark side with us for a little bit to talk a little UCF baseball. Stick around. We're back after this.
Hello, Night Nation. I'm Andrew Fegley.
And I'm Trace Trylko. Where are we? This isn't our usual spot.
It looks like we've landed in the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of those guys.
You know, Knightline has UCF sports covered.
Week in and week out, we bring you interviews with newsmakers and in-depth analysis of UCF sports.
Subscribe to our weekly podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Be sure to subscribe to Knightline on YouTube, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter at UCF_Knightline.
Trace, can we go back to the 1148 studios now and start working on our next all-new Knightline?
How do we get out of here? Go Knights!
Charge on.
Now back to you guys in the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast.
All right, welcome back. And speaking of those two guys, we got one of them with us here to talk a little UCF baseball. Trace Trylko joining us here on the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Here's our interview from earlier. All right, and joining us now, Eric Lopez met him at the Orlando City game earlier today and basically kidnapped him as part of a ransom that we're having that we're trying to extract from Andrew Fegley. Trace Trylko from the Knightline Podcast joining us here on the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. What's up, Trace?
I am so confused by being on the Banneret. I've heard of it. You've been on Knightline, but now, to be in this space and this time, it's very welcome.
Well, we owe you guys a couple back. So so this is the first one. So all right, let's dive right on in. Let's talk a little UCF baseball. So each one of us was in Clearwater at least for something for some of these games this past week. UCF got knocked off by East Carolina for their first loss of the tournament. Fought back, smacked the daylights out of USF. That was fun to watch. Before running into that ECU buzzsaw, once again, East Carolina went on to fall in the final against Houston. But I don't know. What do we make of this as the Knights are heading into the NCAAs? Now we're heading up to the Tallahassee Regional, number 2 seed, facing Auburn at noon on Friday. Florida State is in that. Obviously, Florida State's hosting that region. I think that if UCF had been able to beat East Carolina twice, I don't know if they would have beaten Houston, but if they did, maybe we would have been hosting because Florida State actually struggled much of the season. Trace, what do you think based on what you were hearing?
Well, it's something that Coach Lovelady was asked on the announcement Monday out of UCF when the brackets were announced, and he commented that he thought the tournament winner, had it been UCF, may very well have hosted a game. I hate to question Coach Lovelady after a 40-win season, but the approach that he seemed to take with the conference tournament, it's as though he was preparing for the NCAAs, like a little bit of just skipping ahead to it. And I wish they'd had a little bit more intensity. And he was unhappy with the way they bowed out, too. He didn't think the at-bats were very good and the offense struggled. in that loss to East Carolina. So, I do think they might have had a chance to host. It's a smaller venue compared to, really all of the other regional sites. But it would have been nice to have that home game.
Yeah, we've never hosted before. FSU, I think, is their 39th consecutive year in the NCAA tournament, and I think they're the leaders in the clubhouse right now because Miami had their 42 season streak.
No, you're right. 44 years since.
Oh, is it 44? Okay,
44 years since 1973. FSU now is the record at 40. They're the active leader at 40. So no question about it. Now, let me ask you this, Trace. I mean, we're talking about, we're griping about maybe we would have done certain things. We'd be hosting. If I would have asked you in January, we'd be talking about a regional. What would you have said I would have told you it had 40 wins, win a regular season title, and be making a postseason appearance here in the NCAA tournament for the first time since 2012? What would have been your reaction?
Well, I would have thought it was all crazy, of course. During times of the season, I thought what they were doing was crazy with essentially the same players year to year as they were under head coach Terry Rooney at the time. So, no, it's been a tremendous season. I've enjoyed so much of it. And I would have liked to have seen and from a fan's perspective, the pedal to the metal all the way through. So we'll see how that strategy pays off. Coming up, first game with Auburn, and, they're going to knock heads with Florida State. You're going to get out of Tallahassee. You're going to have to beat the Seminoles at some point, maybe twice.
Auburn this year comes in. They finished 5th in the SEC West, 16-14 in the conference, 35-24 overall. Florida State, they fell out of the top 25. They were 6 games above 500 with the tough part of their schedule coming up, and then they got super hot to close out the season. What are the main concerns that you see from your end right now, looking at that, looking ahead at that? It's double elimination in this regional, of course, as usual, but is there a potential maybe that, I'm a little bit worried that UCF might, I believe it or not, this may sound weird, like looking ahead of an SEC team in favor of seeing Florida State kind of out there in front. UCF struggled against Florida State earlier this year when Florida State was hot, but you worry that they might be looking ahead a little bit?
No, I'm not worried about that in particular. I'm most concerned with the bats. I think you can go deep into this with pitching, and I certainly think they have the pitching to compete and be competitive. But I think back to those Florida State games, not to be looking ahead, but they were handcuffed by the Seminoles at home, shut out in the one game, 2 hit in the other. So I still have some concerns that they're going to put up enough offense. I know that's hard to say. You look at they put up 12 runs and knocked out the Cows in the tournament, and they score some in bunches, but they're going to be playing, in the case of Auburn and Florida State, their best pitchers. So, I guess you'd have to think they're going to get a low-scoring game. Can they produce enough runs to knock out, these teams' top pitchers? And I just don't know. It feels like they could lose a 3-2 or 4-3 kind of game. Hard to see them winning a big explosive game against the likes of Auburn or Florida State.
Trace, I'm wondering, we were there earlier in this year. This seems like a million years ago, but it was in March when Florida State was there for the 2 games midweek, beat UCF both times. In fact, I remember Lovelady after they said, we got exposed a little bit. What I'm interested about, I don't know if people realize this, but back then in March when UCF played Florida State, Chris Williams and Sheridan both were pitching midweeks. In fact, they both pitched those games against Florida State. Williams started that Tuesday night game. Sheridan started the Wednesday game, which makes me wonder, you talked about the conference tournament. One of the things I think that hindered Coach Lovelady was the fact the team come down with a bit of a flu issue. Sheridan didn't even pitch in the conference tournament at all, was not available, which makes me wonder, I think we just assumed that Robbie Howe will get the ball on Friday, followed by, Williams and Sheridan, which has been the kind of the order over the weekends. Do you think Coach Lovelady might start a Sheridan who's fresh, hasn't pitched in over a week, or a Chris Williams on Friday against Auburn, and maybe save Robbie Howe for Saturday, potentially, against Florida State? Does he shuffle the rotation, or do you think he keeps it with the way it's been, going with Robbie Howe on Friday?
Again, hard to question him. I mean, they have one of the top ERAs in the country, and he's handled the pitching staff well. He's handled the bullpen well. And I think back to those moves, you know, when Juan Pimentel was struggling as the Saturday starter, and Lovelady indicated after that, you know, that's the weekend series when Sheridan came in again, some talk about would Sheridan move up to maybe Saturday, and he really liked Sheridan in that sort of save the series, win the series role on Sunday, and then elevated Chris Williams into that role. I can't imagine. I mean, I wouldn't be entirely surprised, but I don't go in thinking that he's going to shuffle the rotation like that. I think he likes the fact that he can pitch bar as well, just flamethrower over the strikeouts. So, you know, what's interesting, I think Robbie House had a great season, obviously, and sharing the honors as the American Pitcher of the Year. But, well, he's got a high ERA for the Friday starter, you know, upward 3+, undefeated. But how do you not go with your senior ace in your Friday start with Auburn? How do you not go with a guy 9-0 during the regular season and picked up a win in the conference tournament to be 10-0 now? How do you not do that?
Yeah, I mean, I like where Lovelady is really giving himself that option, really, because, you know, you're putting your opponent in a position where they don't really know what they're going to have to prepare for it. Let's talk about the American in general here. I thought that 4 teams were going to get in. UConn got left out. So Houston's hosting a regional. USF and UCF are both in as 2 seeds. UConn finished with a 38 RPI. Ole Miss was just ahead of them. They got left out. I thought that this would have been a stronger year in general, but wow, UConn not getting in. Do you think that's a bit of a disappointment to the conference that they didn't get 4?
Certainly. I mean, with the 4th, 5th RPI in the country, they surely wanted to have 4 in there. What impressed me about UConn throughout the season is just by the nature of being in a cold weather Connecticut, they play so many of their games on the road. Yeah, really road warriors. What really did them in, they picked a bad time to get shut out. I think they got shut out at that last game, you know, got walloped by Houston.
Yeah, they got waxed pretty good.
So they picked a bad time for that. You know, it's hard to make this strong argument for UConn in there, but I still feel it's a 4-bid league. So at least 4 schools getting in. And that's, you know, the American has got to earn that respect. I know that they're doing the best they can in that, but they're going to have to beat these big schools head-to-head and win the high-profile matchups and achieve consistency. I think it's a great conference for baseball. You know, it'd be interesting to see what happens when Wichita State comes in. I think it's a competitive, really interesting, fun-to-watch conference for baseball. But they're going to, you know, point back to UCF and Florida State. You got to split those 2 at least when you have Florida State at home early on in the season. And I think at the time weren't they top ranked, 2nd ranked in the country? Yep. I know they fell after that, but that's when these schools, these American schools, have got to make their mark and win those sorts of games to get some eyeballs throughout the season.
No, the highest. I'm looking through the RPI right now. The highest ranked RPI team to not get in was South Carolina. They were 32nd out of the SEC. They were 35-25, so they don't get in. Florida Gulf Coast won the A-Sun outright. They were behind them. South Alabama just ahead of them. They won the Sun Belt outright. But, yeah, interesting field. Now, I'm always going to ask this, Trace, because I've been saying this for years. You know, aside from golf, the sport where UCF year in and year out, I think, may have the best chance to win a championship is baseball. And the Knights get in, you know, right now with a 22 RPI. They have the pitching, 40 wins on the year. They've shown that they can compete. Like we've talked about, there have been some holes in the armor here and there, but do you is this a team that could get to Omaha if things go their way?
The pitching, to me, indicates that it could be a team. I don't expect that to happen, but that's a bit of the fatalist UCF fan. I've seen too many losses in too many unusual ways through the years to fully believe that run is possible. But back to Eric's point earlier, would I have ever thought I'd see a deep NIT run by men's basketball coming off the season that it had the previous year, or the NIT appearance by women's basketball. So for the whole sports year, it's been a season of surprising me that we were going where we went in so many sports. I think the pitching, the relief pitching, I think these guys have been loose throughout the year. I think that reflects on the manager, a big change in direction from Terry Rooney. They've had ups and downs, obviously, 40-win season, but 20 losses, but not really horrible losses. The worst loss they had was the first game in the conference tournament, So, I think the pitching can get them out of Tallahassee, and then you're riding a wave of momentum, and who knows?
If they get out of it, then the other teams on the other side that they would play in that sort of super regional would be the winner of the bracket that includes Texas Tech, Arizona, Sam Houston State, and Delaware. Go ahead, Eric.
Well, you've had a great view. You've been. I mean, people. I don't know if people realize, but Trace. I mean, you've been around the baseball program for a long time, so you've got a great perspective of what can you tell from being at the game, and you've talked to Lovelady a lot. Talk about the difference this year as opposed to the last, since 2012, where the program, I've said on record that the Terry Rooney era was defined by that 2012 regional in Coral Gables. They were one win away from advancing to the super regionals. Stony Brook came back, won the last two games. Ironically, one of the games they beat was Eric Skoglund, who's made some headlines this week. But ever since UCF lost that regional in Miami to Stony Brook, I don't think that program ever recovered from that. And I think that's why the program went in decline. But now you've been around it. You've been around this year. Now looking back, was it a case, is this a case of Greg Lovelady's tremendous coaching? Did we have more talent on the roster than we thought and maybe wasn't coached or motivated properly in the past? How would you break down the percentages of having been around this program here for a while and having a good pulse for kind of the temperature?
Well, certainly you could tell the team was looser and was having more fun, but, which comes first? Are they having more fun because they're winning, right? Or are they, having fun and they're winning and they're having more fun? I mean, which of these things comes first? And obviously they faded down the stretch a lot during the Rooney era, and that was one of the things Lovelady, I remember being at the preseason media event, and he was talking about the strength and the nutrition and all of that. And then you look at Robbie Howell losing 25, 30 pounds. Is just unbelievable to me that you have a college athlete, your top starter, lose that much weight in the off season, and just made you really think about the conditioning and the nutrition and all of that was going on in the previous season. It's a different tempo, but that's not uncommon, right? That you move from you're in one direction and you move in a different direction with the next coach. He takes it one game at a time. Certainly, I mean, not to pull every cliche out, but, he doesn't let them get too down, doesn't, have fun. And they certainly seem like they're having fun. I think back to the clinching against the Cows, and that first inning, Sheridan was a little tight and then relaxed, and the team just rolled the rest of the way, had a good time and had fun and closed out and won the American Conference regular season tournament. So, but if there is pressure, boy, it is in that first game. You don't want to lose that first game, and then you're, the double elimination.
Right.
Boy,
Right.
beating Auburn. That's so important on Friday. Win that first game, boy, you've got some momentum now, and I don't think you're as intimidated being in Tallahassee, playing the Seminoles. So,
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's so key. So that's why I'm interested in seeing, who Lovelady decides to throw out there, for that first game.
No,
last question goes to you, Eric.
Trace, give me you mentioned the bats, and I agree with you. I think the bats is my concern. I think we'll pitch well. It would not shock me if this is a low-scoring game, especially with Auburn and UCF. Auburn's got two great arms themselves. But I am concerned about the bats. I thought they got manhandled by East Carolina there, and you're going to face better pitching this weekend. Who's the key guy in that lineup, in your opinion, that has to have a good regional for them to be successful?
That's a good question. In some ways, I think that it is a person who I felt struggled during the conference tournament, and that's freshman Rylan Thomas. He just didn't have a lot of good at-bats. Now, Coach Lovelady said in the loss to East Carolina on Saturday that he didn't think anybody had any good at-bats, and it really showed. So, I think you've seen Eli Putnam be consistent, Luke Hamblin be consistent, and guys getting on base. But I think if Ryland Thomas can connect a little bit more and be back to where he was a couple of weeks ago, I think he's a big difference maker. And, boy, I'd like to have him coming back. At 12 seniors, and I think, Erica, I believe it was when you were on with Andrew and I on Knightline, I said, would we be where we are if this was a Terry Rooney coach team this year? And I didn't even finish the question. You went, no. Yeah. No,
yeah.
So there's 12 seniors, and this is sort of the run you want to see with your seniors, but I like some of the freshmen, Joe Sheridan, and I certainly like Ryland Thomas. To me, it's Ryland Thomas. I want to see what he can do, and he's your big home run hitter, so he's got to get on base, and to me, he's the key.
Trace Trylko, the Knightline Podcast, on with us here at the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Trace, what do you guys have coming up?
Well, we're going to talk about the baseball, obviously, and we typically record on Sundays. We're not quite sure when we're going to record, depending on how far UCF's run is over the weekend. Hopefully, we've got baseball moving on to talk about. And it's funny, Andrew and I talked about how, we're in the dog days of summer, and I know you're going to experience this on the Banneret, but yet there's been so many things happening.
Yeah.
And different postseason opportunities for men's golf and, men's tennis and rowing. And it's nice to be into June and still talking about UCF sports. So we'll be talking about that. And, we appreciate everybody that listens to Knightline and follows us on Twitter at UCF_Knightline and Facebook and all of that. And it's nice to be in an environment where you got not one but two groups of folks talking about UCF sports all year long.
Sounds good, Trace. Well, we appreciate you coming on. We appreciate you having us on your show with Andrew, as always. And, like I said, we'll all be watching the baseball and keeping track of everything that goes on with that. So thanks again, Trace. We'll talk to you soon, all right?
All right, thanks a lot.
Thanks again to Trace. Thanks again to Andrew for letting us borrow him, even though I didn't ask Andrew. It's all Trace. Watch out, Andrew.
I feel like now in return we're gonna have to go to the studios.
No. Listen, we've been on their show long enough. They need to come on our show now. We've been on. You and I have both been on that show so many times. Listen, they got to come on our show. So we're gonna make this happen, and we may have it happen a little bit more during the summer. All right, a couple things I wanted to get out there before we get out of here. Mm-hmm. Football. Kickoff times and TV partners have been announced for, this is according to UCF on the website, for 3 of UCF's first 4 home games. So mark your calendars. The first conference game, the early game against Memphis, will be September the 9th, 8 p.m. ESPN News. The following week, September 16th, Georgia Tech, 7:30 p.m. on ESPN News. And then 2 weeks later, September 30th against Maine, 6:30 p.m. That's that cupcake game against the Black Bears on ESPN. They shuffle that down to ESPN 3. Little note, season opener against FIU is supposed to be announced in the next couple weeks. And that game against Navy in Annapolis has been announced as a 3:30 p.m. kickoff on CBS Sports Network. So little notes on football there. Nice getting a little play on ESPN for some non-conference games as usual, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, ESPN News is kind of interesting they would go that route. I'm surprised that CBS Sports Network didn't pick up one of those games. A couple quick thoughts on that. Obviously, the Memphis game is a huge game. I do wonder, Jeff, let me ask you, because they didn't announce the FIU game start time yet, so that'll be announced in the next couple weeks. I wonder if there's a chance that FIU game gets moved to a Thursday or Friday, and here's why. Memphis, UCF's opponent on September 9th, will open the season on Thursday night, so they'll get a couple extra days to prepare. If you're UCF and you're the staff, do you consider, if you're able to, obviously FIU would have to agree to it and the networks and all that, whatever. And they've done it before. FIU actually played at UCF on a Thursday night 2 years ago. So, it's
right.
do they move that game to Thursday or Friday to even the playing field there? Otherwise, you're kind of behind this 2 days in preparation for that Memphis game, which is a very big game. Very big game.
I wonder if that's the reason why they're holding off on announcing that starting time. So I wonder if they're trying to negotiate that.
I do wonder that myself. So, and I don't blame them. I would do the same thing. Memphis, when I was up in Greenville and talking to people and even in Clearwater, I mean, there's going to be high expectations for Memphis. Some people think that Memphis or Tulsa might actually be the best teams in the conference. USF's going to get a lot of hype, but they have an easy schedule. But I think Memphis and Tulsa could be the team that ends up winning the conference. So if you're Scott Frost and UCF and you have a young defense getting ready for that Memphis, you might want to get a couple extra days there and kind of even the playing field. So that's my thought as far as that situation.
Interesting.
The Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech, September 16th. 7:30 at night. Nobody's fault at this. This was way in advance as far as the dates were concerned. The one negative there is the 7:30 kick. That's going to be up head-to-head with Florida State Miami, which will be the ABC night 8 o'clock game from Tallahassee. And that's a game that's drawn very well locally in Central Florida from a television rating standpoint. You also have the fact that Florida is hosting Tennessee that day at 3:30. I'm definitely concerned about attendance in that game. I think everybody assumes that's going to be a sellout. I have my questions about that, Jeff. I don't know what your thoughts on that, but I don't like the fact, and there's nothing nobody can do about it. It's bad luck. I mean, who would have thought FSU Miami be on September 16th? Who would have thought? I do have concerns going head to head. I think they're going to lose some people that might have gone to that game that might stay home to watch that game or maybe go to Tallahassee to watch the game. Who knows?
I would be more concerned with that if the opponent was like Maine. If it's Georgia Tech, I think that the fans are going to come out. They're going to come out. So I could be wrong, though, but we'll see.
I think they'll lose a few casual fans on that, but we'll see. And we'll obviously document. We'll talk more about that in turn. The next question, real quick for you, is George O'Leary obviously was honored at the Tulsa game last season with the statue and everything, but he coached at Georgia Tech. It seems to me would make a lot of sense if he's at this game, maybe does the coin toss or something like that, right?
Oh, I would think he would have to be there for that in some ways, shape, manner, form. I don't know what they would have planned, but yeah, I would say that. Yeah.
Aren't you
got to have him there. You got to have him in the building.
And the thing that I'm surprised about, and I don't want to get into whether he deserves a statue and all that stuff. I'm surprised that they didn't wait till that Georgia Tech game if they were going to do the statue to unveil it then. But it was. I mean, again, this was more. I don't think the UCF was involved in this as much as some of the alumni. I think that was the football boosters. I think may have pushed this more than But
there may have been some other reasons, which maybe one day we'll get to. But
health.
Maybe.
I know there's health group. Yeah.
I mean, we'll leave that. We'll leave that one there for right there, but we'll probably talk about it a little bit more. Golf. Yeah. All right. Knights got to the NCAA National Championships at just outside of Chicago. They got to They got through the 54-hole cut, but finished tied for 14th with Florida State. Did not advance to the final round, which in the NCAA, the top 8 teams advanced to a match play championship. So the Knights finished in 14th. They were 29 over par total as a team. It's a pretty tough course out there and some really good competition. It was it was Oklahoma State who came away with the national championship there. So as far as the players themselves were concerned, high finisher for UCF, Kyler Tate finished 23rd. He finished plus one for the tournament. Had a rough third day. Otherwise, he would have been been able to put up a really low score because he finished with a 289 for the tournament, and then Bobby Bai finished tied for 39th individually. So Manuel Elvira also tied and Yuso Carlos tied at 72nd for UCF. So congratulations to UCF. Bryce Waller once again making it to the NCAA Championships, and a job well done right there. And also, as we couple more news and notes that I wanted to finish out here. Rowing finished program best, 18th place at the NCAA Championships in West Windsor, New Jersey, just outside of Trenton. They had 2 boats in the C finals. 28 points overall, just ahead of Gonzaga, who finished with 25 in the team standings. Varsity 4 was looking strong, finished 20th overall, battling with Navy down the stretch, and credit also to credit, by the way, to Megan Herboth, who's keeping an eye on this for us on UCFKnights.com. 2 spots higher than last year, so that's good. And congrats to Becky Kramer again for an excellent season. By the way, Varsity 8, that's the big boat. Best finish ever in the NCAAs. They were 6th place, 648, 449. So congrats again to Becky and her crew for another outstanding job. And a little basketball hire that I wanted to pass along. So Johnny Dawkins announced that he is filling one hole in his coaching staff. Vince Taylor, who is an assistant coach for Texas Tech, is coming to UCF. He is replaces Jamil Jones, who is headed to Wake Forest. But Coach Taylor comes over from Texas Tech, where previously worked with Tubby Smith. Tubby Smith, of course, now the head coach at Memphis. So Taylor, who, by the way, has played pro ball after he played. He was a teammate, or not a teammate, but another former Dookie. Graduated in 1987. 10 years of pro ball. Coached at Louisville and Minnesota. Actually coached 8 years in Minnesota and 15 years at Louisville before coming to UCF. So welcome to Coach Vince. He's on board. And, of course...
Well, he was also at Texas Tech. Just coming over to Texas Tech with Tubby Smith. I mean, he's...
3 years at Tech under Tubby.
Yeah, and what's funny is he was actually on Tuck and O'Neill a year ago. I actually booked him.
Yeah.
When he was Texas Tech assistant. This was right around the time frame that Dawkins got hired. We had him on for multiple reasons. The Final Four weekend. It was the Final Four weekend. And he had played, obviously Texas Tech has played Oklahoma, and they had played, so we break down the Final Four, but we also want him to talk about Johnny Dawkins a little bit. And he knows Coach Dawkins because when Dawkins was coming out for his recruiting trips up at Duke, it was Taylor that would show him around at Duke and stuff like that. And so they go way back. And I think it's a great hire. And again, Johnny Dawkins, and let's not even lose fact, scheduling Alabama home and home and Missouri home and home, according to John Rothstein of CBSSports.com, reporting that for FanRags. Talking about Missouri will come here next year, here in December, coming up in December. And what's significant about that is that Missouri will have the number 1 rated player coming out of high school who could be a lottery pick in Porter, will be playing for Missouri. And he's going to be at the arena. UCF will go to Alabama, according to the reports. Avery Johnson, of course, the former NBA head coach with the Dallas Mavericks, now head coach at Alabama. So Coach Dawkins here, Jeff, toughen up the schedule a little bit with Alabama, with Missouri. Remember, they're going to be playing at the tournament at Disney, which West Virginia is in that. With Taco Fall coming back and everything, Coach Dawkins ain't messing around. He said he was going to toughen up the schedule, and he is. They're going to make a big push for post the NCAAs next year, and so those are some big, interesting news that maybe some people go under the radar, but those are significant news you just mentioned. With the hire of Coach Taylor, I think it's a great fit. And then, the scheduling Missouri and Alabama, according to the reports for John Rothstein, that's a significant stage, as far as a significant upgrade in the scheduling, which we haven't seen here, quite honestly, in a long time.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. By the way, that's Michael Porter Jr., who's the young player for Mizzou, who's highly touted, and people are going to be excited about that coming in for UCF schedule. All right, let's wrap it up here. Ela, what do you got coming up this week?
Well, I'm hosting the Saturday Insider Show. We'll have live reports from Tallahassee going on in the regionals there. So we'll have that going on. Obviously, produce Ackerman and O'Neill during the week. But, hey, we'll be watching baseball, be watching the regionals, following UCF from pitch to pitch on the ESPN2. Again, I want to make a note, ESPN2 on Friday. I don't even know if UCF Baseball has been on an ESPN or ESPN2 baseball-wise for a television game. They've been on CBS Sports Network. They've obviously been on ESPN3, but they'll be on ESPN2 at noon against Auburn, which tells you how much ESPN thinks that's a really good matchup. So looking just excited to see the baseball program back in postseason and following it all weekend.
Good stuff. And I wanted to pass along thanks to some guys that we know. Before we go, I wanted to thank the American Athletic Conference for them being kind enough to allow me to do some fill-in play-by-play at the American Athletic Conference Baseball Tournament. Did 2 games, both of them involving Memphis. One of them was the highest-scoring game in American Athletic Conference history. Memphis beat Cincinnati 15-14 in 10 innings. And then we had another thriller a couple days later with Memphis against UConn. Memphis, had it right down to the end before UConn was able to snuff out a late rally. But thanks.
Really unfortunate. Yeah, real unfortunate, by the way. UConn did not make the field, as we talked about with Trey. Really unfortunate on that. But
yeah, it's a real bummer for Jim Penders. That was a good team. But boy, did Houston look good in that tournament in the process of beating them as well. And thanks to the American, thanks to the guys at L2 Productions too, Scott Reeling and Carl Harper and all the guys over there. And also thanks to Mr. Play-by-Play himself, Garrett Wolvert, who is a excellent broadcast partner, and Jeff Brightwell as well, the guy for the play-by-play guy for Memphis, who is both those guys are total pros on the air, and they do a really good job of making me sound smarter than I actually am. So thanks again to those guys for a great weekend. And that's going to do it, Elo. We're all set. It's college baseball time. Here we go.
I'm excited. Can't
on the
wait,
road
man.
to Omaha, baby. A little bit, couple years late, but here we are on the road to Omaha.
Better late than never, man.
All right, brother. Thanks again.
All right, bud.
And thanks to you for listening. This has been the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. We will catch you next week.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.